Here we are with the Youth Companion magazine, September 9th of 1909, 105 years ago. And we will read you a story, Old Familiar Things. Read to you by Jennifer.
Only the other day, the papers told the story of a man who traveled all the way from India to Massachusetts to trace and buy back an old family horse that he had sold a few months before. Ever since the horse had been gone, the man's wife had grieved. Her condition had finally become such that her husband gladly paid a larger price than he had received, and cheerfully bore the cost of an expensive trip besides to get the horse back. In the same week, New England newspapers recorded the tragic death of an old man who was living comfortably with a married daughter in a town near Boston. The cause ascribed was his longing for the farm where he had spent most of his days and which he had left for a presumably easier existence. There also appeared lately in one of the magazines a description of the pathetic last act which marks the final abandonment of an old farm, the auction by which the homely household utensils that have borne so intimate a relation to the home are distributed among neighbors to whom they have no special significance. Similar things are constantly occurring. To any one with insight, they disclose the depth of sentiment which lies hidden even in the most unemotional of lives. For young people especially, they are full of significance. Nothing is more natural than that a son should say, "Father is getting too old to live alone any longer. The land is all run out anyway. We might as well sell the old place and bring him down here with us where he can be more comfortable." It is the beginning of a tragedy. No land is ever so run out that it does not produce a harvest of memories more precious than the best crop of corn it ever raised. You can make the old man comfortable, but you can rarely make him happy. The roots of an old tree go deep, and the real substance they draw comes not through such obvious tap roots as food and shelter and clothing, but by little thread-like fibers hidden from sight, twined about every stone and penetrating every clod. It is ill transplanting such a tree.
And that's the truth. A lot of the young don't realize that. Stay tuned for more, and we'll bring you some more. Bye-bye now. Okay, this next story is very interesting. The title is anyhow. This is from the Youth Companion magazine, September 9th of 1909. And the title is Saved by a Panther. Read to you by Jennifer.
Governor Jennings of Indiana used to tell a story of his early electioneering days in which he said that a panther may be a good temperance lecturer. Colonel W.A. Cockrum repeats the story in his Pioneer History of Indiana. The incident happened when Governor Jennings was traveling over the thinly settled hills of Dearborn County, electioneering for Congress. He met a man with whom he was well acquainted by name, Tom Oglesby, who was just getting over a protracted debut. Jennings began asking Tom about his political views. The half-sober fellow looked at him and said, "Jen, don't you think a man just out of a panther fight ought to be electioneered in a different manner from this? I am just from the grave. I was awakened a little while ago by a panther putting leaves and grass over me. It kept this up until I was entirely covered. I lie still for a while, and then raised up and found the panther gone. I knew I was in danger, so I took my gun and climbed into a tree to see what the panther intended to do. In a short time I heard her coming, and she had her kittens with her. Every few steps she would jump as if catching something, and the little ones would go through the same maneuvers. She kept this up until she got near to the bed of leaves she had covered me over with, and then made a spring on the pile. She looked just as I felt. I found that I was covered up for dead. She then started in to investigate the cause of my disappearance, and before she located me, I shot her." Jennings, after hearing this, said, "Well, Tom, I believe I should treat you as one from the dead, and that you should begin your life from this point. We were schoolboys together. I know you are capable of civil engineering and well educated, and if you will cease drinking, I will see that you have a good position on the surveying corps." Tom Oglesby did quit drinking. Jennings was elected and kept his promise to an old friend who became one of his well-known engineers of the United States.
Well, there. So there's hope for everyone. Be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and we'll bring you some more stories of 105 years ago. Bye-bye now. Here we are with the Youth Companion magazine of September 9th of 1909. And this is a viewpoint of 105 years ago. And the title is Man's View of Woman's Dress. Read to you by my daughter, Jennifer.
How much do men know about women's dress, and how much do they care about it? Is an interesting question raised by a curious advertising printed in London. The person who placed the advertisement announces himself as a man of good position, with very critical, refined, and exclusive knowledge, and much experience of the best firms which cater to women's wants. He is willing to be consulted on matters of dress and millinery. The heads of a number of well-known dressmaking establishments, when asked for an opinion, all agreed that the knowledge of men about women's dress is small, and their advice in regard to it of little account. They admitted that the heads of some of the most noted dressmaking establishments have been men, but they were of the opinion that the men succeeded only by virtue of being good business managers, and that the details were worked out by women in their employ. It is only the result that men notice, was the general agreement. Very likely there is truth in this view, but there is also truth in the opposite side of the proposition. Many women are so intent upon the details that they lose sight of the result. They cannot see the forest because of the trees, and it is here that the advice and judgment of a man of taste may be service, especially the advice of the husband. He is a man of taste, else he would not have selected so charming a woman for a wife. In a general way, the preference of men is for simplicity in women's dress. It makes for good sense in material and for directness in accomplishing a desired end. Men are uncritical and undiscriminating in the matter of fabrics, but as the London dressmaker tactically admitted, display frequently sound judgment in regard to the general effect. Above all, they are far more inclined than women to consider the individual case rather than the general style, and that is not unmixed evil.
Very good. All right, says the dressmaker. Stay tuned. Be sure to sub me, and we'll bring you some more. Bye-bye now. Okay, here we are with the Youth Companion magazine, September 9th of 1909. And the story we're going to read to you today is The Teacher's Problem. And it'll be read to you by Jennifer.
Every school teacher, whether her work be in a graded city school or in a log cabin on a mountainside, finds herself confronted by a dual problem: teaching those who are eager or willing to be taught, and reshaping the character of those who are unwilling so that they shall be willing. Somehow, it is this later task which seems the most immediate necessary. The boys and girls who want to learn will find help in their textbooks, and will make doubly valuable the time given to them by the teacher. But in every school there is at least one pupil who apparently does not want to learn, and who, left to himself, will drift farther and farther from the path he should follow. Sometimes such a pupil is mentally lacking, but in the far greater number of cases he is capable of work fully equally to the best of his comrades if he can only be persuaded to take it up as enthusiastically as he has avoided it. His energy, which should have been directed toward it, has been from some failure in earlier training. directed into a wrong channel. It must be deflected into its proper course. The problem of how this is to be brought about, of how the black sheep is to be made the best of the flock, somehow looms larger before the teacher than any other. How shall it be done? How shall this misformed character be reshaped and built upon a better foundation? The publishers of the Youth's Companion have put this question to thousands of teachers all over the country, and seeking to learn from their experiences and successes what way success lies for others, have collected and compiled many of their answers. These experiences have been published under the title The Teacher's Problem. Many parents will find this book suggestive in the training of their children. Read it and then give it to the teacher of your own children to read. The incidents in this pamphlet are all true. Some are extremely in type, but all bear testimony on the fact that if the proper key be used, every heart can be opened and every character transformed. One copy of The Teacher's Problem sent post-paid for 7 cents.
Okay. That
And
would
there's
be
a
really
little-
nice.
There's a little poem up here. It says, "No heart so hardened but some magic key will force its bars into its dungeons bring. Hope's messenger, like him whose minstrelsy searched the black Australian prison and set free a captive king."
All right. So there's a good story. The Teacher's Problem. Sounds like a really good book that should be given to teachers. Time to refresh that 105 years later. All right, be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and we'll bring you some more interesting stories. Bye-bye now. Okay, here we are with the Youth Companion magazine, September 9th, 1909. And the story we're going to read to you is A Disappointed Bird Lover. And it'll be read to you by Jennifer.
It is never hard to identify the bride and groom, and it is correspondingly difficult to refrain from a good-natured smile at their expense. A writer in the London Chronicle illustrates these truths thus: "We tried to keep the railway carriage to ourselves," said the girl who can appreciate a joke against herself, even when on her honeymoon. At Birmingham, the guard opened the door and, in spite of Walter's scowls, lifted a small girl into our compartment, making rather embarrassing apologies. She was a little girl of about 7, and she sat on the edge of the seat and stared about her. "What is the matter?" said Walter. "I don't see the birds," said the small girl plaintively. "Birds? What birds?" asked Walter. "When I came from the other train, your guard said to my guard, 'Oh, shove her along with the lovebirds.'"
Oh, that's cute. Oh, that's cute. I love it. That was a nice story. Okay, be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and we'll bring you some more loving stories. Bye-bye. Okay, here we are with the Youth Companion magazine, September 9th of 1909. Now, these stories were written 105 years ago, and today we're going to read Teaching Dick to Eat. And it'll be read to you by Jennifer.
"Come and get your dinner," cried Mrs. Cozens to her husband. He was standing by the... It's her husband. Sorry.
Gotta get over the title, right?
Well, you put a lot of emphasis on that, so yeah. He was standing by the canary bird's cage, holding a morsel of bread between the bars. "He's got to come and eat this bit of bread while I'm holding it in my hand," responded Mr. Cozens. "Not stirring. You know he won't eat it out of your hand," remarked his wife. A writer in the New York Evening Sun tells the story. "I know he will," replied Mr. Cozens with some spirit. "I tell you he won't," replied his wife. "I tell you he will," repeated the man. "Well then," said the woman, "why doesn't he?" The bird was at this moment at the farthest end of the cage. "Because he's a fool," snapped Mr. Cozens. "If you don't come right away," said Mrs. Cozens, "and finish your dinner, I'm going to clear the things off." I don't care, said Mr. Cozens. Stoutly, this bird has got to be tamed. Tamed, scoffed his wife. I said tamed, replied her husband, with some asperity. What does he want to jump away for every time I bring him a bit of bread? It's his nature. Then I'm going to change his nature, said Mr. Cozens. A pause, a long one. Come and finish your dinner, dear. I tell you I won't come and finish my dinner till he comes and pecks this bit of bread out of my hand. The shadows lengthened and twilight fell. Mr. Cozens stood obstinately at the cage and held the bit of bread while Dick tried the best to get away from it. Mr. Cozens began to clear away the dinner things as she had threatened. What are you doing? She called from the next room after a while. Nothing, said Mr. Cozens hastily. Where are you? Asked Mrs. Cozens, putting her head through the doorway. I'm here, said he. Where do you suppose I am? He was sitting in his chair, and the cage was on the floor by his side. Where's Dick? Said Mrs. Cozens with sudden alarm. Shh, cried her husband. Can't you see he's perching on my finger? The little dear, said the lady, advancing a step. Don't come near, warned the other. You'll frighten him, and he might break his leg on something. Why should that make him break his leg? Asked his wife. Well, said Mr. Cozens, you see, I've got him tied.
Wow, that's gross. So did he eat the bread? Just because you haven't died don't mean he's going to eat. Oh, man. Okay, be sure to sub me. Join me as a friend. We'll bring you some more interesting stories of 105 years ago. Bye-bye. Okay, here we are, September 9th, 1909, in the Youth Companion magazine. And we're going to read the story today, In an Australian Tornado. And it'll be read to you by Jennifer.
The tornado of Australia is related pretty nearly to the same phenomenon in this country. It is on the land what the typhoon is in eastern waters. The storm of wind and rain is preceded by an unnatural stillness and silence of the elements. Sensitive persons and animals are aware of the approaching storm. The authority of parts of the Pacific, who calls himself a peripathic parson, experienced one such gale when he was at the house of a friend in the northern part of Australia, very near the equator. His account is humorous as well as instructive. By and by there came across the night air a distant roaring noise. The stillness of the slumbering hours was broken. Something terrible was at hand. As had been foretold by the clerk of the weather, the wind began to moan, then to whistle, then to bellow. The roof rattled, the trees shrieked, rain rushed and hissed, lightning blazed, and thunder crashed and boomed. All the household was busy holding on to goods and catching things as they were hurled off by the violence of the storm. The roof was ripped up and carried away. Shutters and doors, walls and furniture, off they went, and people raced after them to rescue. All were at work, myself included. I had a bad leg coming on, and considering the bed to be the most valuable article in any part of the house, I right manfully lay in it. And so held down from the comfortable bed, I watched the roof go off, piece by piece. From it I saw the slabs and boards go. I saw everything go until there was nothing left at my side on the house but me and my noble bed. Together we weathered the storm bravely. Together we remained in the torrents of rain and in the blinding lightning, littered with broken timber, hornets' nests, oranges, bits of furniture from the next room, pomelos and guava, boughs of trees, and sundry other things. I had never before witnessed a tornado, and the kind bed generously afforded me a front seat on the brow of the hill, from which the whole show was seen splendidly. Moreover, as you did not always require a roof over your head in that country, it was a mere trifle being left without one on a night like that. When the storm ceased and the daylight forced itself in measure through the still inclement weather, it was strange to see the river a long way up the lawn, and spreading its turbid waters over the plain which we had traversed only the day before, right up to the foot of the mountain. 2 trees out of every 3 were blown down, and no leaves were left on any. Water was running everywhere, and the bright, peaceful scene of yesterday was now an expanse of dull gray and wholesome desolation.
All right, so there you go. Be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and we'll bring you some more stories of 105 years ago. Bye-bye now. Hey, here we are with the Youth Companion Magazine, September 9th of 1909, and we're going to read you a story titled A Standish Tradition. It'll be read to you by my daughter, Jennifer.
All students of genealogical matters know that as a rule, family traditions are extremely untrustworthy. But Dr. Miles Standish of Boston relates an interesting incident which proves that this rule, like others, is not without its exceptions. Dr. Standish, who is the 8th in direct descent from the great captain of Plymouth, has written a genealogy of the Standish family in America and has acquired a fund of information about the earlier family in England that enables him to straighten out the tangled skeins of the ancient family history. When Dr. Standish was a boy, his father told him that it was a family tradition that on the wall over the fireplace in the main hall of the ancestral home of the Standish family at Standish in northern England, there was painted in the portrait of one Mary Standish, said to have been the most beautiful woman of her time in England, and famed in the family annals for having fought off single-handedly a band of raiding Scots who came down over the border to attack Standish Hall. The story made a deep impression on Dr. Standish, as it had on his father when it had been passed on to him from a remote generation, and when he became a man and was able to visit the Standish ancestral seat in Lancashire, the first of his family in America to do so, he had by no means forgotten it. Standish Hall has been continuously in the same family for at least 700 years, a record approached by but few estates in England, and Dr. Standish, as a representative of this distinguished American branch, was cordially received. When he was conducted over the older part of the great house which has stood unchanged for centuries, his attention was called to the portrait of Mary Standish as to one of the family's most cherished possessions, and its story was related to him identically as he had heard it in a boyhood in America. The portrait is a crude piece of work on the oak paneling high above the big fireplace, and experts have pronounced it over 400 years old. Dr. Standish dryly remarks when he tells the story that either the standard of beauty or the standard of art has made a great advance since Mary Standish saved the old hall from the wild Scots. The point of it all lies in the fact that in all the 7 generations of the family in America before Dr. Standish, no member, so far as is known, had set foot in England or had a communication with the Standishes of Standish. The story of the picture had been handed down as a family tradition from generation to generation, absolutely unchanged in any detail. Even Captain Miles Standish himself, the younger son of a younger son, had never been at the ancestral home. He received the story from his father before he became a soldier for fortune, and he cast his lot with the Pilgrims of the Mayflower in spite of his descent from an ever-loyal Catholic family.
Wow, that must be a beautiful picture. Very nice, very nice. All right, be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and we'll bring you some more of history and how it was written 105 years ago. Bye-bye now. Here we are, September 9th of 1909, reading to you stories from the Youth Companion magazine. And the story we're going to read now is Not on the Sands of Time, read to you by Jennifer.
The ingenuity which the lady in this story from Tidbits displayed might more profitably have been exercised in inventing a new sort of gift for the popular favorite. The curate had just arrived. He was young, handsome, and single, and consequently very popular with the ladies of the parish, whose appreciation took the usual form of worked slippers. Recently the following episode occurred. Fair caller, you see I wanted to make Mr. Chasuble a pair of slippers, and I thought you might lend me one of his old shoes to get the size. Curate's landlady. Law, miss, these shoes is all a given out 4 days ago, and it was only yesterday morning a lady as had heard his shoes was all bespoke came here a imploring of me to let her measure the wet footmarks in the reverend gentleman's bathroom immediately he had gone out.
Okay.
That's a little too obsessed.
Yeah, I think so.
That's iffy.
Yeah. All right. Be sure to sub me. Join me as a friend. We'll bring you some more interesting stories of 105 years ago. Bye-bye now. Okay, here we are, September 9th of 1909. And let's see, this title is No Complaining. So let's see what they thought of that 105 years ago. This story will be read to you by my daughter Jennifer.
A writer in Tidbits says that a wealthy gentleman living in North Devon, who took a great interest in the church, offered to give the chore a treat, and decided on the really princely one of taking them for a week to Paris. He escorted them himself to places of interest and beauty in that charming city, but not once during their whole stay, or even on their return, did one of them say to him that he had liked the trip or had enjoyed himself. Naturally anxious to know whether they had done so, a few days after their return he asked one of the church wardens, a former farmer in the village, whether he thought the men had enjoyed their time in Paris. The church warden cogitated for a moment or two. Well, sir, he said at length, I ain't heard no complaints.
Okay, and this was worthy of writing in a paper. No complaints. Bye-bye now. All right, here we are with the Youth Companion magazine, September 9th of 1909. So let's read to you a story of 105 years ago, titled Probable Hit, and it will be read to you by Jennifer.
The late Thomas Bone, the sailor's missionary, was the soul of kindliness, but he had a keen wit and a ready tongue too. An instance given in his recently published life is the following. His work was not without its humorous side. Among the new men, there were always some who saw a little amusement at his expense, but they reckoned without their host. His kindly manner never changed. The smile never left his face. There was no venom in the report, but it seldom failed to silence the interpreter. The laugh raised at his expense made it quite certain that no second attempt would be made. Seeing him approaching one day, one of a group of sailors announced his intention of having some fun. He stepped forward and removed his hat, revealing a perfectly smooth crown, and asked, "Can you tell me why my head is so bald? While all my companions have plenty of hair?" "I don't know," was the smiling reply, "unless the reason given me the other day by a farmer would apply, that an empty barn is not worth shingling.
Oh.
Snap!
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that story. Be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and we might find some more funny little ones like that. Bye-bye now. Here we are reading to you from the Youth Companion magazine of September 9th of 1909. And we're going to read to you the story, Too Expensive. And it'll be read to you by Jennifer.
It is an elementary, although a genuine kind of humor that prompts a man to make a ridiculous remark in a serious manner. The fun increases if the remark is taken at its face value. A case in point is that of a gentleman who, according to a writer in Twiggs County Citizen, was talking to a crowd on the street about shingling a house. The old rule, he said, was to allow 6 inches of the shingle to show to the weather, but that is too much. You really ought to let more than 4 inches show. Oughtn't to let more than 4 inches show. Some wag asked in a matter-of-fact voice, "How would it do not to let any show?" "I've seen roofs made that way," replied the other, not thinking, "but it takes a great many shingles."
Okay, so it's all about saving. Saving the shingles. All right. Stay tuned and we'll bring you some more great stories of 105 years ago. Bye-bye now. Okay, here we are with the Youth Companion magazine, September 9th of 1909. We're bringing you stories of 105 years ago, and this one here we're going to read is A Lesson in Logic. And it'll be read to you by Jennifer.
It is only within the memory of living man that legislation has undertaken to protect domestic animals from the cruelty of their owners. Ownership was held to be absolute by most, but there was one man in England 100 years ago who could demonstrate the unattainable nature of this theory. This man was Thomas Erskine, one of the greatest lawyers and advocates of his age. A Lord Erskine, which Mr. Charles G. Harper has put into his book, Rural Nooks Round London, and which shows how this legal authority would have administered most recent laws. It is related that the celebrated Lord Erskine, walking one day on Hampstead Heath, saw a ruffianly driver shamefully trashing a miserably ill-cared-for horse. My lord remonstrated with the driver on the cruelty of it, whereupon the fellow retorted, "It's my own, mayn't I use it as I please," and started whacking the wretched animal worse than ever. Erskine, greatly annoyed, laid his walking stick over the shoulders of the offender, who, crouching and grumbling, asked my lord, "This is the drawing-room version, not a verbatim report. Which would you read rather differently? What business he had to touch him with the stick?" "Why," said Erskine, "the stick's my own. Mayn't I use it as I please?" There you go. Yeah.
There. Get what you give. There you go. Do unto others as you would want others to do unto you. All right, be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and we'll bring you some more stories. Okay, here we are with the Youth Companion magazine, September 9th of 1909. And we get a short little story to read to you. And this one is titled Electric Smelting. This is read to you by Jennifer.
At Nelson, British Columbia, a large electric smelter is now at work reducing mixed ores of lead and zinc. The ore is first crushed to the size of wheat grains and then roasted, by which process most of the sulfur is removed. From the roaster, the ore goes to the electric furnace, which melts it into slag. The lead sinking through the slag passes into a crucible. The zinc takes the gaseous form and is led into condensers, which it is ladled out into pigs.
Huh. Okay, well
Weird.
that's a little bit of science stuff. Okay, and what have we here on the side of these Wish to see all the styles. All...
Women's suits, $10 to $40.
Ooh,
And then you have an American Eagle kite for only $125.
Oh,
And it can get up to 21,000 feet.
Very good. Look at that. Ain't that interesting? Wow, to get a whole suit like that, that's beautiful. All right, stay tuned for more. Bye-bye. Okay, here we are, September 9th of 1909, and we're going to read the story from the Youth Companion magazine titled Marvels of Titanium. Be read to you by Jennifer.
The cause of the remarkable effects produced by the addition of about 1% of titanium alloy to iron and steel is still under discussion. In the case of chilled iron car wheels, it is found that the alloy makes the metal closer grained and free from blowholes. The wearing qualities are greatly improved because the metal being freer from impurities does not become so hot under the application of brakes. In consequence of this, there is less expansion and contraction, and so less strain. That there is less absorption of heat, and the alloy is indicated by experiments with ingot molds made of titanium iron. When filled with molten steel, the molds remain black and have proved very lasting. A casting of titanium alloy iron heats less than an ordinary casting when worked under a tool, and on the other hand, tools of titanium steel are less heated than others in service.
All right, be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and we'll bring you some more interesting stories of 105 years ago. Bye-bye. Okay, here we are with September 9th, 1909 from the Youth Companion magazine, and we're going to read the story today, Guided by Invisible Waves, and it'll be read to you by Jennifer.
On June 24th, a new torpedo, guided by Hertzian waves, was experimented with on the scene. The novelty of this torpedo is that it carries acetylene lamps, which by changes in their light indicate to the distant operator the reception of the impulses transmitted by him to the machinery which drives and guides the torpedo. Thus he knows whether the apparatus is working properly or not. The torpedo, floating low in the water, obeyed the electric guidance, turning this way and that, or darting ahead at the will of the operator, whose transmitting apparatus was carried by a small automobile canoe. The inventor, Monsieur Gibbet, claims that the light would enable the operator to detect and counteract interference with the movements of the torpedo by electric waves sent out from an enemy ship.
There you go, and that's from the beginning of time, really. That's 105 years ago. A little interesting stuff of how things were done back then. Be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and we'll bring you some more. Bye-bye. Here we are with the Youth Companion magazine, September 9th of 1909. And the story we're going to read to you is called Life Rings on Mountains. Be read to you by Jennifer.
A remarkable example of the way in which a mountain may afford, on a small scale, an image of the Earth's climates arranged in successively higher circles, has been founded by Dr. P. Lowell in the San Francisco peaks. These, which are ancient volcanoes, rise out of a plateau having a mean elevation of 7,000 feet above sea level. The peaks are encircled with zones of vegetation, which run almost like contour lines round them. Between 6,500 and 8,500 feet, the yellow pine is the dominant tree. From 8,500 to 10,300 feet, the Douglas fir, the silver fir, the cork fir, and the aspen share the available ground. Between 10,300 and 11,500 feet, the Engelmann spruce and the foxtail pine take possession and ascend to the tree limit.
Well, isn't that interesting? That's some interesting facts to know. All right, be sure to sub me, join me as a friend. We'll bring you some more. Bye-bye. Here we are with the Youth Companion Magazine, September 9th of 1909. And we're going to read a story to you of Waste of Youth, read to you by Jennifer.
The British Poor Law Commission discovered that about 3/4 of the boys of Great Britain enter unskilled occupations on leaving school, and only about 1/5 afterward become skilled workmen of any kind. To raise the school exemption age and to provide night schools would, the Commission thought, tend to lessen the additions to the number of casual laborers. A recent report, which is approved by the Minister of Education and bids far to be embodied in a government measure, goes farther. The minister would raise the age at which children may be employed on half-time, keep them at school until 16, and set up employment agencies which would help young people to choose suitable occupations and direct them to courses of instruction and intended to fit them for skilled employment. Possibly the situation is more serious abroad than it is at home. Yet here also the results that sadden British statesmen are noticed. The wages paid to boys in many occupations seem surprisingly large, and never stopping to find out what he is fitted for. Many a boy goes blithely after such a paying job. By the time he discovers that his work leads to nothing and never commands more money than he received at first, it may be too late for him to qualify for skilled employment. Then he may drop into the ranks of unskilled labor, liable to become one of the earliest victims of industrial depression. Perhaps the average American lad is more enterprising, which means more adaptable, than his British cousin, and in this land of opportunity has a better chance to recover from a false start. Nevertheless, his parents should advise the boy who needs work that future prospects as well as present returns are seriously to be considered. Unless his work leads to permanent and preferable skilled employment, he is wasting his youth, and it may be his manhood.
And that's the truth, and that's also true today. All right, be sure to sub me and join me as a friend, and we'll bring you some more stories of 105 years ago. Bye-bye now. Okay, here we are, September 9th, 1909, from the Youth Companion Magazine, and we'll be reading to you another poem. And this one is titled, A Ballad of Borrowed Books.
Where are my borrowed volumes, say? Where are the books I used to own? Banished like mists at break of day, vanished like summer nestlings flown. My shelves are empty and alone, and I must bitterly repine, lamenting easy kindness shown. Where are the books that once were mine? Return, my prized Clarissa, pray, my Ruskin decorous in tone, my Esmond bound in leathers gay. Ah, that one loss I can't condone. My shabby dog-eared thumb moonstone, my new trail of the lonesome pine, my lost Lavengro make me moan. Where are the books that once were mine? I miss my Hever's witty way, I want my water babies grown. Perchance to manhood ere this day, I crave my Herrick, my Shenstone, my Shaw to paradoxes prone, my what to eat and how to dine. On sterile sands my trust was shown. Where are the books that once were mine? Envoy, borrowed listening and then stone, all of your ill-got goods risen, lest you in turn shall sit and groan. Where are the books that once were mine?
Very good. Hope you've enjoyed that poem. Be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and if we come across some more, we'll bring it to you. Bye-bye now. All right, here we are with the Youth Companion Magazine, September 9th of 1909, and we're going to read to you the story, Plant Intelligence, and it'll be read to you by Jennifer.
Writing of the Italian catchfly in his essay, The Intelligence of Flowers, Maurice Maeterlinck, the Belgian poet and philosopher, shows how this simple little white flower goes with seemingly intelligent thought about the business of its own preservation. Apparently very timorous, very susceptible to avoid the visits of importunate and indelicate insects, the silent Italica furnishes its stalks with glandular airs, whence oozes a viscid fluid in which the parasites are caught with such success that the peasants of the south use the plant as a flycatcher in their houses. Certain kinds of catchflies, moreover, have ingeniously simplified this system. Dreading the ants in particular, they discovered that it was enough, in order to prevent them from passing, to place a wide viscid ring under the node of each stalk. This is exactly what our gardeners do when they draw a circle of tar or other sticky substance around the trunks of the apple trees to stop the ascent of caterpillars. In a popular work, Les Plantes Originales, Mons, Henry Coupon examines some of the defensive means employed by plants. Some of these weapons are quaint and startling. Monsieur Gauthier, a student at the Sorbonne, has made a number of interesting experiments with thorns, resulting in the conclusion that shade and damp tend to suppress the prickly parts of the plants. On the other hand, whenever the place in which it grows is dry and burned by the sun, the plant brittles and multiplies its spikes, as if it felt that, being almost the sole survivor among the rocks or in the hot sand, it is called upon to make a mighty effort to redouble its defenses against an enemy that no longer has a choice of victims to prey upon. It is a remarkable fact, moreover, that when cultivated by man, most of the thorny plants gradually lay aside their weapons, leaving the care of their safety to the supernatural protector, who has adopted them in his fenced grounds. Among the plants that have ceased to defend themselves, the most striking case is that of the lettuce. In its wild state, says Monsieur Coupon, if we break a stalk or a leaf, we see a white juice exude from it. The latex, a substance formed of different matters which vigorously defend on the plant against the assaults of these slugs. On the other hand, in the cultivated species derived from the former, the latex is also missing, for which reason to plant, to the despair and the gardeners, is no longer able to resist and allow the slugs to eat it. It is nevertheless right, comments Maeterlinck, to add the latex is rarely lacking except in the young plants, whereas it becomes quite abundant when the lettuce begins to cabbage and when it runs to seed. Now it is especially at the commencement of its life, at the budding of its first tender leaves, that the plant needs to defend itself. One is inclined to think that the cultivated lettuce loses its head a little, so to speak, and that it no longer knows exactly where it stands. Certain plants, among others the Borygnes, supply the place of thorns with very hard bristles. Others, such as the nettle, and add poison. Others, such as the geranium, the mint, the rue, steep themselves in the powerful odors to keep off the animals. But the strangest are those which defend themselves mechanically. Monsieur Maeterlinck mentions only the horsetail, which surrounds itself with a veritable armor of microscopic silicae. With a veritable armor, moreover, almost all the gramineae, in order to discourage the gathering of slugs and snails, add lime to their tissue.
There you go. A little bit of interesting facts about plants. Very good. Nice story. Be sure to sub me, join me as a friend, and we'll give you some more stories of 105 years ago. Bye-bye now. Right, here we are with the Youth Companion Magazine, September 9th of 1909. And the story we're going to read to you now is Appalling Recklessness. And it'll be read to you by Jennifer.
The late General William Mahone, well known as a Confederate officer and later as a United States Senator from Virginia, was both remarkably short of stature and remarkably slight, a fact which gives point to a story related by General Adelbert R. Buffington, formerly Chief of Ordnance of the Army and now on the retired list, which is printed in the Troy Press. General Buffington was related to occurrence to some old comrades with whom he was dining. General Mahone, he said, was very thin. One cold and windy December morning in '64, he was taking a nap in his tent when his old colored servant, Uncle Davy, tiptoed in and, stumbling in the darkness, knocked down the general's folding cot and spilled him out on the frozen ground. General Mahone jumped up furiously, seized a scabbard, and made for Davy. Davy ran. The general gave chase. Uncle Davy tore up hill and down dale till he was pretty well out of breath. Then he looked back over his shoulder, and his master, who bounded after him on slender legs, blue and thin, his long white nightshirt fluttering in the chill morning. "For de land's sake, Mars Williams," the exhausted Davy yelled desperately, "you ain't trustin' yourself in dis wind on them legs, is you?"
All right, let's turn the story around. All right, be sure to sub me. Join me as a friend. We'll bring you some more stories of 105 years ago. Bye-bye now.